Greetings. It is the 30th of May, and this is Content Evolution New World. I'm your host, Kevin Clark, and co-host Mike McGuire is out in Silicon Valley. Mike, delighted to have you with us.
Great to see everybody. How is everybody doing today?
See a lot of nodding, a lot of thumbs up. It's good. Delighted to have Bill Tung with us today. Bill is a colleague for decades, good man. He is going to share what you see up on your screen, the notion of Copilot as a new species of PC, right? With some Microsoft architecture and code and some Qualcomm Snapdragon chips on the board. I'm looking forward to hearing what this will entail. I will say that, sometimes we facetiously say, oh, it's going to take a nuclear physicist to understand this. Well, guess what? Bill is a Yale physicist, all right, by education. And so it's always been a delight working with you, Bill. All right, we're glad you're with us. And like Candace, who was talking before we got started, you both migrated to Microsoft and have done good things, for us. So I'll turn it over to you, and as you're talking, we'll collect some questions and we'll get to Q&A. All right?
Okay, thanks, Kevin. And feel free, guys, to stop me anytime with any questions you have. And then I'll also preface this up front. You'll be able to tell there's a selection of these slides that are my slides, and then a decent selection of these that I've just stolen from the marketing team and the marketing chart. So you'll be able to tell that the very marketing-oriented charts pretty easily. But I thought they were very useful to just kind of explain, I think, a bit of why I was very excited to be part of the team working on this over the last year plus. And again, hopefully you'll hear a little bit about why I'm excited, and I'd love to get kind of a general reaction, because as always with a lot of these things, when we're working on something closely over a concentrated period of time, you get a lot of excitement on what you're working on, but you get kind of tunnel vision and you don't necessarily get that broader, wider perspective. I think the team in general is after launch or after announcement last week is kind of getting over that announcement high. I think many or most of you have probably been part of where you work on something for a concentrated period of time, and rightly so proud of what the team has done, but then you kind of get to step back and see how it actually landed in the market and so forth. But in any case, thank you, Kevin, for inviting me to kind of talk a little bit about this, and hopefully it's interesting to all of you. So let me go ahead and start here first by, again, a little bit of backdrop for those who might not be as familiar where I've been the last couple decades. As you guys know, I worked with Kevin on ThinkPad brand, worked for Kevin way back in the relatively early days of ThinkPad, and then was at IBM in the IBM PC group through when it got sold to Lenovo, and then when we moved over to Lenovo, worked directly for Fran O'Sullivan for a couple of years, and then worked in corporate strategy until I left in 2008, when took a little time off working on a startup, but then joined Microsoft right before the Windows team released Windows 7. So part of Steven Sinofsky's team when we did Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10, and then left a little while when the team did Windows 11, but then of course we got this one here. So I'm not a full-time employee, but I contract back. So there's stuff that I can talk about that, of course, is public now, and other stuff that I may have to dance around if you guys got very pointed questions here. But again, to step back here, of course, Microsoft made a very hard pivot to do everything AI. Just a little less than a year ago, I would say. I don't think it was really until fall of 2023 that you saw Microsoft just pivot everything to AI. And from an semi-inside point of view right now, it's very, very just infused throughout the company. Like everything has got some level of AI flavor to it. Obviously, it's worked out well from a stock market point of view for the company, and I would say there's a lot of genuine excitement, rightly so, that for the first time in a couple decades, there's like clear market recognition of what the company's done. I mean, again, Satya has done a tremendous job since taking over from Steve Ballmer. In being a good face for the company, and he's, again, this is, I think, he's definitely earned his money here in terms of, you think CEOs earn their money based on how the value of the company goes. He's been a great communicator for just direction externally as well as internally. So I'm going to step back here and then try to give some context when I look at things that I've worked on or been part of that kind of frame up where I see this transition that's happening now, right, with Copilot PC. So Kevin and others of us who worked on ThinkPad will remember back in the mid 1990s, the ThinkPad brand was definitely, on the leading edge. This was a ThinkPad 770 where, all the best technology we could stuff into a portable PC at the time, including modular bays and everything, were stuffed into, this, it was a portable PC, but, a powerhouse portable PC. And then I think this was around 1998 or so, and Kevin will remember this. We had sub-notebook PCs and we had highly mobile PCs, but Sony introduced this Sony Vaio 505, and I think it definitely freaked out the leadership team at ThinkPad at the time, because of I think it pushed a mindset from a portable PC really to a notebook or a truly mobile PC. It wasn't just trying to squeeze all the things of a desktop PC down into a laptop form factor, but it was really, again, while we definitely had some notebook PCs that were very thin and light, I think people kind of recognize, hey, there's some trade-offs that people would be willing to make to have the PC, the laptop PC, become a notebook and become really truly mobile. This was also about the time frame where, we were debating and did end up putting things like Wi-Fi, embedding Wi-Fi into the PC, and into the ThinkPad, and again, this was two or 3 years later. Nobody questioned that. It's like, of course you want to have wireless communications on your portable PC, but we were debating at the time, do we add the $100 cost or not? It's a lot of money to add to the laptop. Will people really pay it? Nobody has this infrastructure. Why would we do this? So, but you drive these transitions in the industry, and stuff happens after that. I don't know, Kevin, I'd be curious. I'm sure you remember that phase in time when Hidalgo had.
I was spending time with Intel at the time for Mobile Data Initiative to try to create the infrastructure. Intel's motivation at the time was that the mobile chipset cost like twice as much as a desktop set, and if it was, they wanted to sell a lot more of those more expensive chips, so they were trying to create an enabling environment for people to want to carry the computer underneath their arm, as opposed to having two PCs or trying to lash them together, right? So I remember that. And I also remember that Sony put a lot more emphasis on ergo its name, Vaio, acronym for video audio input output, right, compressed into a name that it did some pretty good multimedia things right out the box because of Sony's background and its heritage, they wanted it to be a good on-screen experience. And there were some things to learn, right, from that. I'll conclude by saying, we were aware that Sony was still buying ThinkPads from us, right? Because the kind of the background quote was, we know what these VAIO computers are for, and we still need some more industrial strength computers to do some things that we want to do. So we still need ThinkPads. So they were still a customer for quite a while.
So we didn't rehearse this, but that's a great segue here. I actually would step back into almost a decade before, where we had this transition where the IBM PC, the IBM PC-AT, the clones that were coming on into the market from Compaq and so forth had pretty much gained traction out there in the marketplace in the mid 80s. But then there was this initiative that that actually was an industry initiative, but Microsoft was there pretty much driving at the forefront, where there was a spec called Multimedia PC. So again, I think many of you guys are gray hair, remember this. There's a core spec of, I don't remember the actual spec now. It's probably like 50 megahertz, 486, but definitely had like a 2x CD-ROM and Sound Blaster compatible card, blah blah blah, right? And because again, there were graphical programs. I mean, even Lotus 123 and so forth had graphical capabilities back in the AT, but there wasn't a common standard that somebody who was actually writing software could write to put together what we would call a multimedia application back then. And again, there was kind of a lot of potential questioning at like, why do we need this? Is it just a consumer thing? Blah blah blah. I think at the time they ended up actually being 3 different specs over time: Multimedia PC 1, 2, 3. But 5 years later, like nobody even questioned, why do you need a multimedia PC spec? I mean, all PCs had speakers and microphones and CD-ROMs and so forth. But it again took a concerted industry effort there to drive a minimum spec, to allow kind of a core set of capabilities that then you could advance the software that would go on to what was going into the computer. And I see somebody has a hand up. Was it or question in the chat? No questions.
No, I just put a comment in there that there was a time when these were sold under the IBM Ultimedia brand. That's all.
Yeah.
Do we have to put a thank you to Steve Jobs in here?
I don't know. It's kind of interesting because Mac had certainly had a common spec there, but the center of gravity, I think, at this point in time of the industry, was certainly still on the PC side. I mean, Windows hadn't really actually been completely established. I could potentially argue that the multimedia PC spec was one of the things that drove Windows 3, helped drive Windows 3, and then 3.1, and then 95. So I'm sure folks like Mike were there at the time looking at the industry, could probably remember the specs on what share different people had and so forth. But again, I think it was a relatively important milestone to try to have that core spec out there that people could drive to, that then you had software developers that could develop to. So then I'll give one more example here that I think is actually then very analogous to the situation we're in right now. Again, in this kind of time period, I'm giving people history lessons that I think most of you all remember. I think some of my younger colleagues here at Microsoft don't remember any of this these days. So when I talk to them about these analogies, they draw a blank. But you had like these graphical video games that were out. I think Doom was probably late 80s, early 90s time period.
Yep.
But then, and you had all kinds of different video cards out there. And what you had to either have was the right video card to run the game, or people had to do different versions to do different video cards and so forth. And Microsoft had been getting by this point in time large market share. Some would argue monopolistic market share. But one of the things they did was put this standard out there for graphics, a graphics API called DirectX. And so if the game vendors would write their graphics to the DirectX APIs, then they could be pretty much assured that any PC that could then run DirectX with DirectX graphics could run that game. And then, history would also show that that was actually their key to breaking into the video game industry, because the console, the Xbox that was then developed, was also ran the DirectX graphics, so you could then have games that could run across both PC and a game console that would hook up to a TV. And this kind of standard API that abstracts away the underlying hardware underneath is, I think, super important here. And there's I think, a great analogy to what I think is happening here with AI capabilities here on the PCs. So let me pause here, see if anybody had any comments or questions before I kind of move on to some of the some other charts here.
Yeah, there's also kind of related to the hardware piece, Bill, there's a long history of, chipsets that were auxiliary to the main system, whether it was a math coprocessor or, something that you needed to render more polygons, all right, or so on and so. Hey, there's the chart. That evolution, is, clearly part of, of this story.
Yep. Yeah. Again, Kevin and I did not rehearse this at all. We should not talk about this, but so you're a great intro here to this next slide that I got, where, again, to think about this, you had a CPU, and again, back in the Doom days, if you will, all those graphics computations initially were basically just done on the CPU, and then you address the video memory directly. Or there would be some level of acceleration through a GPU, but again, it was all individual. You write to individual GPU architectures. Of course, as I just talked about, kind of at least definitely on the PC side, DirectX kind of abstracted that all away for the game developers, and again, now you just have a GPU, at least in the Windows ecosystem, that has DirectX API. So, and for the consumer, they can decide, do they want NVIDIA, do they want AMD, do they want something else? Doesn't really matter to them. I think, interestingly, you had first kind of cryptocurrency, and then more recently now found that AI workloads work really well on these GPUs. Because of the highly parallel architecture on the GPUs. Of course, again, you can run all these on the CPU, but it's much more efficient to run them on a GPU. But these GPUs, the way they're set up, are set up for large parallel floating point applications, which aren't necessarily completely optimized for the GPU. And so I think what's interesting now is you've had these NPUs, or what Apple's called neural engines, and Google has their own term for what they put on their Android chips, which have been in there for a while. And again, I would completely agree that in some sense, with Tim Cook is right, like Apple and others have had AI and ML accelerated workloads on phones for a while. So, when we do our Face ID recognition on an iPhone and so forth, those are things that take advantage of their neural engine on an iPhone M series chip. We got the same thing on Google's Tensor processors on their Android phones and so forth. It's kind of interesting. When I was doing competitive strategy for the Windows team 5 or 6 years ago, and these were first coming in, I was urging the business to look more closely, see, hey, do we need to accelerate and push the PC ecosystem to get these embedded into the silicon, the socks that were going into PCs as well. Pushing that, I left, and then I left for a while. But I think it was very interesting for me to come back and then consult a year and a half ago to see. Oh, it looks like some of it took a while, but it looked like some of the senior leadership was paying attention and pushing this. And so this is what I think is kind of been a multi-year process. And when we look at these transitions and say, oh, this has happened really quick, but there's always I think there's a common saying out there: changes happen slowly and then quickly. And this is one of these, I think, inflection points here where we finally have now gotten these neural coprocessors embedded kind of across the silicon. I think why it's important. Again, some people argue, yeah, you can do this on a GPU on a PC today, so why bother putting an NPU here? But the reality is, there's the kind of computations that can be done on a dedicated design for AI workloads NPU can be done a lot more power efficiently on an NPU than actually the GPU. The graphics chips, even on a notebook, are still very power hungry. A slightly different set of computations than what is ideal for the AI and ML workloads. And then again, I think the difference this time is now here on the Windows side, at least, there's a common API. And I'll show you some more charts on this in a moment. But just like kind of DirectX came in to kind of abstract away how you write those workloads to form on the silicon, you have this Windows Copilot runtime now that's basically going to be embedded in Windows here. So there's
Bill?
Yeah.
Tim, I'll go back a second. I put in the chat a link to a report we did on the NPU for Copilot. Microsoft and Qualcomm commissioned us to do this, and we published it the day that the announcement. But that goes into details of why that NPU is, what the NPU does, and why the NPU is important.
Cool. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, you this is probably in some of what you've probably published there, I would guess. I just flashed up a number of things that were talked about both in the Copilot Plus PC announced a week ago, Monday, as well as later on in build, as some of the developer experiences and capabilities that sit underneath. I'll just, again, I won't be able to drain any of this or give any of this sufficient depth, but just kind of want to give people a flavor, just like, again, I said, mentioned there's like this abstraction layer, if you will, to enable the people who want to write AI workloads to run locally now to a common set of APIs. They don't have to worry about, is this going to run on a CPU or a GPU or an NPU? The direct ML system architecture here that's here in the upper right basically allows you to kind of abstract away. It's actually set up to take in some of the common runtimes that are out there today, like Onyx and PyTorch. And then that maps into direct ML, and then basically underneath then the Windows and the API layers underneath basically take care of figuring out, okay, if I have an NPU that's optimized for this, it's going to run on the NPU. If I don't have this, I can run this on the GPU, and so forth. So I think that's an important thing to note. Just like, again, back in the multimedia PC or the DirectX, like these things, the developers don't have to think about adapting this to a specific library, specific chipset. They let and worry about what hardware it has to go to. Windows will take care of that. And then there's a set of things here that, again, you got a lot of press on this kind of recall feature where the PC is going to record locally your state, take little snapshots of your state on an ongoing basis. The thing that I think people don't quite recognize yet, but I think over time you'll see how the power of this is, instead of just having an index of the documents now that are on your PC and stored on your PC and what you work with, what Windows is compiling here is a local, what's being dubbed a semantic index. So there's actually not just the keywords around the files and so forth, but there's actually the semantic index here that basically puts together the concepts and relationships around the different pieces of information that you're working with. So again, I think probably continue to be scary for some people to say, hey, my computer is now compiling all this. But there's just, I think the flip side is there's tremendous power available there. It's the same thing as like dealing with Google today. It's like, and there's a balance here, obviously, to be developed and make sure it's kept, on the right side of the creepy line, if you will. There's tremendous power of being able to record where your location is, what you're doing, and so forth, so that you actually recall that and then jump back in and so forth and pull things together when you have this semantic index that's being compiled real time with the MPU that's on board your PC.
Bill, would it be rational to think about this capability as a local knowledge graph to serve your, the individual's, RAG or retrieval augmented generation of a specific set of things that you created or that you ingested into your system, so that, when you're asking a question, instead of going out to some very general thing, that it's saying, look here first, look at what I've created, or, the things that I think are important first, and bring those back to me. Is that a good way to think about this?
Yeah, I think that's the initial thought process, but I think what this leads to, again, we'll see how this plays out over time and who develops this and is able to do an effective job here. But we've had a long time this thought process of having agents work on our behalf, and by having that semantic index there, this is what enables these agents to be actually developed. It's like you no longer, it's like just saying, hey, find this information for me so that I can work on it myself, but you actually can say, hey, I need to put together this project that involves putting a presentation here based on this stuff, and you have your agent embedded on your PC that can do this effectively. And much of this will actually probably involve going back out to the cloud to get information as well.
Yeah, I got that, but I'm just saying.
So
the second, part to this is that, of course, Microsoft has been a great enabler of enterprise solutions. So, you have, individual deployment, but then you have collective deployment across an enterprise, right? And when I was working with Toyota with head of knowledge management there, we envisioned a day when, you would be able to, start to collectively build the wisdom of Toyota across all of the individual contributors, right? That, there was a lot of information that was scattered. It wasn't available. It was, like lean, it's continuous learning and continuous improvement. But, the continuous learning was hobbled, by the inability to actually construct an ongoing organization knowledge base that was continuous and building, all right, as opposed to it being episodic. So I look at this as being, at an enterprise level, when you opt in to employment, right, with all the IP things, that this is a foundational building block to being able to accomplish, organizations starting to build a in perpetuity knowledge base.
Yeah, that's, I think you're spot on there, Kevin. I think this is a good chunk of why people who are investing have made Microsoft the $3 trillion market cap right now, because the company does have that inside track here with the Microsoft 365 subscriptions that the businesses are have already today. And then I think it was just the last quarterly call, Satya mentioned that 60% of the Fortune 500 have already adopted Copilot for Microsoft 365, which is the AI-enabled piece on top of Microsoft 365. Now, I'll say, be the first to say, 60% doesn't mean that everybody is subscribing to it. 60% have started looking at it. Sure. Nonetheless, this is like less than 9 months since the introduction of Copilot 365. That kind of even having 60% of people looking at it in that short period of time is pretty, in my head, pretty astounding. And I think this is, again, with the inside track here, is like Microsoft is already getting all that customer feedback now on like what level of access do they want to have enabled with AI, and what needs to kind of be kept very bounded from people to access with the AI. I mean, the rights management stuff, this is stuff that they've had to deal with from company corporate feedback for a couple of decades now, quite frankly. So that kind of insight into what companies want to do and will allow to do, and then build the right controls around that, is for better or worse. Again, different people have different opinions of Microsoft. Is Microsoft to lose, just like it was for IBM's to lose, 3 decades ago. So it's up to the company to kind of take advantage of that, or let somebody else come in and take that. But I think that's a large part of why you've seen enthusiasm here for Microsoft's AI initiatives, because the first part where this is being applied is actually in very large organizations, and that how the employees in those organizations can actually get access to the capabilities to make them more productive.
Makes sense.
Other questions here? Tim, I'd be actually curious.
And by the way, you can turn Copilot on and off, can't you, if you're an individual user? So,
oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So that's the, this is not a, you can opt out real fast, right, if you want to.
Bill?
Okay.
Yeah, sure, Mike.
Question?
In addition to,
Go ahead.
In
Okay,
addition
Candace,
to being
then Mike.
okay. In addition to being able to turn Copilot on and off, can you bound it somehow to your kind of world of info or corporate?
By default, it's off. By default, it will not record anything that's in private or incognito session that's on your browser. So that doesn't come in. There are controls right now or there will be controls for which apps are allowed to be recorded. And the right now for enterprises, it's just purely on and off in terms of policy controls. But what has been is already in development and has been promised is more granular control, just like companies today can turn off by policy different functions of the Windows PC. There's going to be very granular controls for companies to put on what can and can't be recorded, and so forth. Like, this is all in the encrypted store locally. You actually can't back it up, that encrypted store, so it's not like you can take that encrypted store and put it on another PC to access it. It's actually just locked to that specific PC. A lot of this stuff, I know, like, again, just after announced I would call it more of a grandstanding politician over in the UK, said, "Oh, we got to look into this privacy implications of this." But I know for a fact that the team that developed this months ago already started talking to the EU and making sure that it was going to comply with all the privacy standards that the EU has. I mean, again, you know that the Microsoft CELA team, just like IBM's in the day, and many of these companies are, for better or worse, again, very well versed in the pitfalls around this. And you can bet that the legal teams have looked at this before going out to market.
Mike, then Suzanne.
Bill, this is great, by the way. Thank you very much. I guess to that issue you're talking about, you know, my enterprise's IP, et cetera, and rights, you know, around data rights and whatnot, is understanding that the Copilot is, the concept is I can have this, you know, locally on my system. Having some of that, I would imagine, and if this is, you know, NDA understood, that a lot of the Azure enterprise clients have already developed those sorts of kind of, you know, protocols for rights management. Is there a direct link there, or am I making something up?
Yeah, that's again, I don't have all the engineering details around this, but absolutely, like, you know, Azure today, they've got different bounds on where the data can flow, and then that's replicated into, you know, your Microsoft 365 subscription with Word and Excel and PowerPoint and so forth. And then that's, again, my assumption, we'll see how the implementation ends up, is that then also extends into how you manage and can granularly control the Copilot recall functionality on your PC itself.
Okay, and I was just, with the Office 365, I don't suppose there's going to be a Copilot version for running Office on a Mac?
There is Copilot 365, and that will run on Mac. How well it, well, I'll also say this though. I mean, the Office team definitely does not consider Mac or iPad or Android a second class. It's all equal. So when they put that DRM capability, it extends out through to Mac and so forth. But there's not the recall capability that the Windows PC will have on Mac. Right. So this is deeply embedded within the OS, right? That semantic graph that I just mentioned, that's embedded in Windows. So I think this is actually one of the things, honestly, why Satya was excited about this coming to Windows PC, because this, again, we'll see what Apple announces at WWDC here in a couple of weeks, and maybe Tim has some insights in that as well. But having this embedded in the OS is actually an important differentiator potentially at this point. And, you know, again, the fact that the company can drive those deep links between the management tool and what's actually happening at the endpoint is something that I would argue that it does not happen that well today. Like when you deploy onto a mobile device today, typically you have like two profiles. You have like a work profile, you know, the device management has like a personal profile and a work profile.
Right.
And, you know, it's like firewall between the two, right? So anybody that's worked with that knows you kind of have to switch between these profiles. On Windows, again, we'll see how this works in practice. Theoretically, that should be more transparent, and it's more integrated. I would say, not necessarily transparent. Actually, it should be. It still should indicate like, hey, we're dealing something here with work. I can't share that with your personal. But you know, it will be embedded in the OS. You're not kind of literally dealing with like two partition things on your phone.
Yeah.
Hey, Bill, since you mentioned Apple, I want to just interject two key things on the NPU side. As you mentioned, Apple's been doing NPUs for a long time. One data point that Qualcomm has been pushing is the fact that their Elite XL runs at 40 tops. The NPU runs at 40 tops. the one issue is that it has to have a fan. Apple's NPU tops out current one at 38 tops, but it runs without a fan.
Mhm.
And actually gives you even longer battery life than what you can get with the XL because of the fan draw. The other thing that I think you're going to see at Macworld, excuse me, at WWDC that's going to be very important. Well, I think and I actually think they're going to talk about the role of AI on the Mac. I think and even the iPad. I think the more interesting thing is, I actually think they're going to create the equivalent of a Copilot PC on the iPhone,
Hmm.
and it's going to make the iPhone. And there's a term being tossed around actually in the financial world that they're using to describe what they think it's going to be is in telephone. And so if you get a chance to watch the WWDC keynote, I think you're going to be quite surprised with what Apple has already done and what Apple's doing around this, because they have so much experience with the MPU and the neural networks that has been fundamentally in every iPhone since 2015, I think it is, and all the new Macs. And I had a chance to look at the architecture behind the M4 that's in the new iPad, and I'm telling you, that sucker screams. And you imagine if when they put that into a Mac, the significant difference you're going to have there, even above probably what Qualcomm has in the Elite XL.
Yeah.
Can I ask? This is Mark Prensky. I appreciate and I love all this technical stuff that we're talking about. Can you give a paradigm example, either Bill or Tim, of what you can do now using Copilot that you couldn't do before?
I'm going to go. I know Suzanne has her hand up as well, and there's multiple hands up. I do have a few of the marking charts, and I was just going to give some of the user scenarios of what like the Copilot PCs will give you when you can buy them next month. That might be helpful, but maybe we want to handle some of the other questions here before I get there.
Suzanne?
Oh, thank you, Bill. Very fascinating presentation. I'm really looking forward to unlocking my AI advantage. I bought Copilot Pro, and I've just recently started experiencing it. But with this semantic indexing, does it go back in time and interface with your stored files or those files that are in the cloud? Because it and then in perpetuity, right? I understand that concept with this, but does it reach back then into when you interface your stored files on, from storage devices and the cloud? Does it go back?
So the recall functionality is just when you start going forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
As it going, so you have to build it.
Yes.
Oh, okay. That's unfortunate. I mean, it would be really cool to go back to,
Well, yeah, I think this is all kind of early days yet, right? Like,
okay.
I'll go
Cool.
back to my multimedia PC, like you had, whatever it was, Compton's Multimedia Encyclopedia, and that was like the, initial vision of like, hey, what can you do with a multimedia thing? But of course, we expanded in all sorts of different directions once the capability was generally available there.
So is the Copilot Pro, I just bought a Lenovo and then a Lenovo, and I didn't realize it even came with Copilot Pro, or Copilot. I just went ahead and purchased it. So yeah, and it has Windows 11 on it. Huh.
Well, I have to actually say, if you just bought it, it doesn't come with this.
Yeah.
It's only the new PCs that just got announced last week with the Qualcomm chips that will have this. The Intel and the AMD ones will be out later.
Yeah.
That have this NPU capability. That the current ones have a weaker NPU on there right now, and the there was made a determination that there need to be a kind of a minimum threshold for this to work effectively. So
Bill, you
Thank
bring up
you,
an
Steve.
You have
you
to
bring up
Go ahead.
Do you have to purchase then a new PC system to?
Well, yeah, there's a link in the meeting notice, Suzanne, that shows you the specs for the one ThinkPad that is enabled the way that Bill's describing it.
Oh, thank you.
So you can go to that and you can see the difference between your specifications, and it does not, what you bought does not have a Qualcomm Snapdragon chip on it, right? And so there's a little bit of a link up between what's happening with the software and the need for this NPU from Qualcomm to work together. But look at it and you'll see the difference. And it can't be emulated. So
Oh, thank you,
don't
Kevin.
need to get another one.
Kevin,
know.
Just encourage
it's
you to get another
important,
ThinkPad.
Kevin, it's important to note that that's an incredibly significant issue from an industry standpoint,
Yes.
because the vendors believe that this is going to create a massive refresh going forward.
Sure.
Now, I think that they're correct on that. I don't think it'll happen immediately, other than the early adopters. But when we did some research on this with the enterprises, and they're looking at this and going, crap. I mean, I got to replace all of my thousands and thousands of PCs now that you've given me this. I'm telling you, they're bucking it at the
Yeah.
moment.
I think they are, and the fact is, they would have to be given a compelling new use case for
Correct.
the capability to, invest in a new image to work across the entire enterprise, and the redeployment of, new PCs. I think it's more likely, Tim, just personally, that they will probably prototype inside of some group that they think is that needs this, and they will work inside that context as kind of a test case before they do full enterprise deployments. All right, they're going to do like a skunkworks, all right, version. All right, so it won't happen as fast as it won't be this tsunami. It will happen over probably the next, what do you think, Tim? 2.5 years? What do you think, Bill?
It's going to take. It's interesting that I know Tim's got his research and the team
Yeah, I
that
know.
working on our research. It's not going to be immediate for sure. Again, these are relatively high price points, early adopters, so forth. Actually, interesting enough, the thing that I've actually been personally working on with the team is how to put together these proof of concept engagements on these Copilot Plus PCs,
right,
so that Dell, HP, Lenovo can go out there and get these seeded into accounts, and people can understand the value here. But yeah, it is going to take a couple years. Having said that, the thing that, for better or worse, is part of the dynamic here is Windows 10 goes end of support at the end of October 2025. And so there's a refresh recycle coming anyway. That would have happened anyway. The question ends up being, I think, much like Tim was talking about, do these companies go for their current standard Windows 11 Pro PCs, or do they go for a Copilot Plus PC, or do they buy the extended support to buy themselves more time to stay on Windows 10?
Where are we on the 11 cycle, Bill?
The
Is that
11
like
cycle,
kind of like EOL, or near end of
yeah,
life, or?
It's very the trajectory is very similar. I've looked at the numbers. So again, part of what I've been working on with the team here over the last year and a half, it's pretty much on track of where, we saw it with 7, and then when 7 went end of life and so forth. I won't go into more detail than that because there are, third-party companies that provide those numbers for us. But that's kind of the trajectory and the track that people are looking at right now.
So Bill, in terms of questions, we heard from Mark and then Doug's hand went up. So whenever you can answer Mark's question about applications, then Doug would be next.
Yeah, let me just take 2 seconds to kind of give you some of the, again, and I'm happy to send these charts out if people want to look at them.
Outstanding.
Afterward. but these are some of the marketing charts, and I'm not going to read everything to you, but so the example here is like working on high impact projects, like say new product development, driving social impact, creating some customer sat, and so forth, right? So, here's kind of where the Copilot PC would work out of the box here in when you get one in 6 or 8 weeks here. So one of these things that's exclusive to Copilot Plus PC is like you literally go in and say, find the document I read 2 to 3 weeks ago with the Indian demographic information in a pie chart, and the recall will then pull that information for you, in your timeline here, and then with the Microsoft 365 Copilot integration here, you guys basically say, hey, summarize the main points from this demographic report in a table of 3 or 4 pros and cons. It pulls up PowerPoint, and then get those points, and it can create an executive slide. So like stuff that could have taken multiple hours to do, the AI functionality pulls that together much more quickly for people. So again, part of what the Microsoft sales team is counting on is being able to demonstrate this to people, and then show how much time people can save from having the AI functionality embedded in on their PC. Make that argument that, hey, for the incremental cost of your PC, that the amount of productivity gains you can get from having Copilot Plus on the PC, Copilot from Microsoft 365, more than offsets the kind of incremental monthly cost. Some of the other stuff that's actually beyond some of the Copilot, so that beyond the recall functionality, it hasn't necessarily gotten as much attention yet. But the one here in the middle, or on the left-hand column here, I actually think is super cool. With the small language model embedded there, on the Copilot Plus PCs, you have real-time language translations from 44 languages plus, and more being added to English. And this will work for any spoken or video content where it'll generate the live caption. So even though we're on Zoom right now, if I were speaking in Chinese or Japanese or whatever one of these 44 languages, your PC locally will be able to translate real time with a live caption on the bottom, and that's embedded on your PC. That doesn't have to go to the cloud at all. That's just, and again, I know some of this stuff is already made its way to phones and so forth as well. So it's not necessarily new, but it is new to the PC, and this is something that's going to be embedded there. And then again, this is integrated in with some of the Microsoft 365 functionality. I don't think we're using this on Zoom right now, but I know in meetings within Microsoft that we do within Microsoft these days, first thing everybody does is turns on record and transcribe, because the AI functionality in Teams these days is absolutely fantastic. I mean, this is, to me, this has been the best commercial I think Microsoft has for Teams, is just showing how when you have a meeting, hit the record, at the end, you get that full transcription and describing to who said what, and then automatically generating the meeting summary. It's super well done, the meeting summary, including things like action items and so forth. That kind of stuff's that's not done directly on the PC today, but as we get more of those PCs with the embedded NPU on there, you can offload some of this capability in future to local functionality. So quick flavor. I know I don't want to take too much of the time with these explanation of use cases, but hopefully that helps.
It does. And Doug, I don't see your hand up anymore, but I know you're still with us. What was the question you were going to pose?
Well, it's, I guess a couple things is, there's this balance between security and, convenience and functionality, right? And So, as I'm looking at, employing some of this, that would be one of the things I'm thinking about. The other thing is, this reminds me of the movie Her at the beginning where they said, okay, you have, 10,000, emails and only, 50 of them are relevant. So we can get rid of all the rest. Right. So, and in the movie, they like go away, clean up my computer. Right. We all have our computers that have lots of junk in it, probably only, a lot of the material you have on your computer, you'll never look at again. In fact, one statistic is like only 3% of all medical information that is stored at hospitals are ever looked at. So 97% are just junk that might as well be in the trash bin. So, I see this as critical, absolutely a great use case. And to Mark's point is can you have the use case, but then of course it's the security, right? It's like I'm letting, Microsoft, I'm letting, Apple to look at everything on my phone. And do I trust it, right? Everything on my computer. And
Right.
so it will be interesting to see how this plays out. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you can, you talked a little bit before, and maybe I came in a little bit early or late, but some security and concerns about security versus this more with more functionality, you have more concerns about security, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bill, is there anything built into this? I understand that the core data, the actual information that you can contain that, but is there anything edge running in this thing that's pulling off, general information, coefficients that are going back to the mothership that we need to be thinking about? Because that's a standard thing when you opt into websites, when you opt into other things, is can we do analytics? Can we just look at the performance data? And I would think that would probably be another, like you said, opt in or opt out, part of that granular thing that you were talking about. So read us in on that from your perspective.
Again, this is all very new. None of this stuff's shipped yet.
Yeah.
My understanding is that it's all an opt-in setup. So whenever there's a new thing that needs to get shipped up, there's an opt-in to allow this. I mean, the vision here is that we will be living in a hybrid world with AI. Like there's going to be some AI that's done locally and some AI that's done in the cloud. The OS actually has to do some of that mediation for it to be completely effective. Is like, what do you want to do locally? What do you need to do in the cloud? And needs to make the user aware of what's being done versus what's being done locally. So again, I'm not trying to make this a commercial for Microsoft. I'm just trying to communicate the way that this has been thought through is like there's multiple levels here that has to, this is again a marketing chart here, but just to illustrate that there's multiple levels that need to be communicated on, like what's done locally, what's done in the cloud, what's free, what's paid. That all has to be made transparent. So the short answer is yes, it's going to be complicated, but none of this stuff in the real world is clean.
Sure. No, I mean, you would expect that, there would be some people who would want to opt into, having the thing train itself better so that they would get the benefits back, right? And, you have to make a decision about, where you're going to opt in. So, Bill, we're at the top of the hour. Thank you for sharing everything that you did about this, especially providing some context right up at the beginning of, where did this come from, and now, what are we heading into? Do you have some final thoughts that you want to share in terms of those who are listening in now, those who will listen to the replay, in terms of when should we dive in to, this combination of software and hardware as individual practitioners, and when do you we'll leave the enterprise folks to make their own judgment, but as individuals, a little dicey about when we should refresh. So I value having that perspective, and then we'll say thank you.
Yeah, I'm just really curious to see, I think, again, back to my multimedia PC examples, like, the stuff that's being shipped right now is, or even like the Apple Mac, like, Mac Write, Mac Paint got shipped with the original Macintosh, and it showed us the vision of, like, hey, here's what a GUI does for us. This is what's different. And it took a while and it took a few other things, like, the Apple Laser Writer and HP LaserJet to make, the whole desktop publishing thing happen, right? We all, I won't say all, but most of us here are old enough to remember that whole transition of, that's what drove kind of graphical was, hey, Adobe PageMaker. So, where's the Adobe PageMaker and that set of apps? I mean, even when Steve Jobs stood up there with iPhone, there were no apps. There was no app ecosystem at that point. He promised it. Oh, you can do everything with the browser on here, right? Yeah, but I do think within the next 18-24 months, you start seeing this critical mass of hardware that's out there that then you will see clever, and some of this is going to be as luck as much as anything, but clever use case that takes the people's imagination over, and that's why I'm excited. I think it's an interesting inflection point, and I'm going to be looking for that. Where's the Adobe PageMaker on this thing? Where's the halo that drove Xbox type thing?
There's no question that as it starts to actually manifest in ways that you can say, oh, that's something I want to do. That's when you move from point A to point B in terms of opening your wallet, in my opinion. In addition to, if you're running things where your OS is going to go end of life, well, that's you want to stay mission critical. You clearly need to stay current with both hardware and software. Bill, thank you so much for sharing with us, as always. And I didn't put it at the top of the call, but I'll put it here at the end, that Bill is a valued member of the Content Evolution Board of Advisors and has been for quite some time. So we're delighted that he continues to give us the generous value of his thinking when we're at crossroads that require the kind of thinking that I originally hired him in to be a strategist, to do. And so it's good to see all of you. Bill, do great. We'll be talking to you again soon. And in everything you folks do, be intentional and ask better questions. Cheers.